Hi, everybody. You reach S.J. Thomason with Truth Matters at Christian-apologist.com. Big question: is abortion a grave moral evil? That was the question that Protestant, apologist, Christian Allie Beth Stuckey asked. And she was surrounded by 20 liberals. So today we're going to review her answers in response to the liberals' answers and to this big important issue. And then we'll also cover what Randal Rauser said in his response to her. And as a bonus, I'll tell you one of the reasons why I'm very passionate about this topic and why I joined our Respect for Life group at my church. And so let's go. Here we go. So Allie Beth Stuckey, I'll just, spoiler alert, she's in the right here. She's definitely in the right. And so here's why she's in the right. Her position on abortion is very pro-life. And if you live in the United States, you're subject to the 14th Amendment, where it says, "Nor shall any state deprive any person of life, liberty, or property without due process of law, nor deny to any person within its jurisdiction the equal protection of the laws." Well, that clearly, back in the 1800s, late 1800s, makes it quite clear that we are all entitled to life. Human life begins at conception. According to 96% of 5,577 biologists, human life begins at conception. In other words, a soul becomes a soul at conception, and it is not within our rights to destroy what God created in his image and likeness. Now, the study I'm referencing, a biologist, comes from Issues in Law Medical Journal, and it's a really good article by Jacobs. Now, personhood is the issue here. Some people say, well, a baby isn't a person when it's first conceived inside the womb. Instead, it takes a little while for personhood to be conferred, and they claim it's conferred by the mother. In other words, if the mother doesn't give any value to the baby inside of her womb, it doesn't assign it a name or anything like that, the baby has no value because, according to this belief, at some magical point during the gestation process, personhood is conferred. My belief, which is very sound, is that personhood is conferred at conception and not at some arbitrary point. And so I believe, because of that, pro-abortion state laws violate our 14th Amendment. I also believe that Roe v. Wade, when it came about, and the judgment against personhood, claiming that personhood begins at some arbitrary point in the gestation process, I believe that that, unfortunately, is terribly flawed. And that is the position that Randal Rauser takes, which we'll look at in just a minute. Now, what does God think about all this? Some people, including some of the people in this surrounded debate, make the argument that in some weird way, serious amount of, what would you call it? A serious amount of mental gymnastics to be able to look at the Bible and say that God is supportive of abortion, especially in light of one of the 10 commandments from Exodus 20:13, that thou shalt not kill, or what God says in Proverbs 6:17, God detests hands that shed innocent blood. So let's take a look at what Allie's responses were. Now, here's her first interlocutor. He was a male, and he said that a majority of abortions in the first 6 weeks are not violent or painful. Humans do not yet have pain receptors, he said. So what does Allie say in response? She said abortion is always violent to the preborn human. And the abortion pill, which many women are taking now, which is really unfortunate, it starves them. But the thing about the abortion pill that's really sad is it's been on the rise in use. If you go back to about 2016, it used to be that a woman had to show up at the doctor's office 3 times in person to be prescribed the abortion pill, and then she had to take it in his office or her office. Now the problem is people are getting it by mail, and it's being mailed all around the world, and it's destroying babies because it starves them. And of course, that's painful, as Allie pointed out. We don't permit killing people if they won't feel pain. That was another point she made. Very good point. And Allie also said, listen, in the 1% of abortions that come from rape or incest, she will grant that for the purpose of the debate. But he still wasn't interested. He wanted all 100% of women to be able to use what he called health care. You know what's a real shame in the United States? Our eagles, our bald eagles, and our turtles have more rights than the human inside the womb. If you destroy a turtle egg or an eagle egg, you could have prison time and a big fine. But go ahead and destroy the baby inside your womb. It is just terrible what we're doing. We've killed over 63 million people in the United States since 1973. These are lives that'll never be continued, family structures, family hierarchies, family ancestry that'll never come to do. And so it's a real shame. Now, here's what else he said, this particular male in this debate. He said, life doesn't begin at conception because ancient Jews believed it begins at first breath. Who cares what ancient Jews believe? That's why I gave you what today's modern scientists, the biologists, 5,577 of them said. 96% of that group said, guess what? Life begins at conception. So instead of looking at what ancient Jews who did not have the technology we have believe about life, take a look at what we already know. One of the reasons why a lot of women choose not to abort their babies, they choose to bring their babies to fruition and to carry through the pregnancy, is because they see the baby in the ultrasound. It's also another technology that we didn't have decades ago. Thankfully, we have that. And that technology convinces a lot of women that, hey, wait a second. Look at my little baby. It's got little arms and cute little legs and little nose. I'm not going to destroy this baby. I'm going to carry it. And so here's our second interlocutor, a female. Here's what she did. She pointed to Numbers 5 and she said, well, in Numbers 5, it said, if a husband suspects a woman has cheated on him, he can send her to a priest to test her through a drink. So the priest makes some sort of concoction. And if she's innocent, she'll keep her child. If she's guilty, she'll lose her child. So it's kind of like, unfortunately, a miscarriage. And Allie said, well, we don't know if that was a miscarriage. It's sort of a strange passage. Female said, yes, there is nuance to some verses. And then Allie said, would you say that killing a defenseless person is always wrong? And she said, well, we need to define person as when you can see the feet and body after 6 weeks. Abortion disproportionately impacts low-income people. The fetus is just a clump of cells. I fell for that garbage many years ago. I'm guilty of, and I've repented of this many times, but I'm guilty of, unfortunately, being an accomplice and driving a friend to an abortion clinic where she had an abortion and she came out in pain. She looked as if she had just fought a battle and lost. It was awful. It was probably one of the worst experiences of my life. I never forgot it. And thankfully, when I came back to the church, I went in and confessed that, because that is really horrific. And a lot of us fall into this trap. We believe that the baby inside the womb is merely a clump of cells, that we're not really harming human life, that it's not painful to the baby. We believe all kinds of the crap that's perpetuated by our media and by a lot of very popular people online. And we can't fall for that. We have to realize that a soul becomes a soul at conception. Just remember that phrase, a soul becomes a soul at conception. Now, going back to this verse about Numbers 5, there's some passages in the Bible that are kind of strange, but again, we can look at the big picture of what God said about killing. Thou shalt not kill. And he also detests taking an innocent life. And so just the combination of those two should be enough. But also we can look at what the early church thought of abortion through the Didache, written in the 1st century by the apostles. In the Didache, it explicitly said abortion's wrong. And the Catholic Church has always held consistently through centuries, never changed its mind, that abortion is wrong. It's morally wrong to take the life of the innocent child in you in every circumstance. Allie's interlocutors said, female number 2, she said, well, in Exodus 21, the punishment for accidentally killing a woman was greater than accidentally killing her baby. Therefore, she has more value. In other words, she's making the claim that because the woman has more value, the woman has the right to take the life of her baby. But Allie rightfully pointed out, well, in Jeremiah 1:5, it says, before I formed you in the womb, I knew you. And before you were born, I consecrated you. I appointed you a prophet to the nations. In other words, God blessed us while in the womb. Before we were even born, he gave us intrinsic human value and dignity. And it's not our right. He's conferred that dignity upon us. When he said in Genesis that we're made man and woman in the image of God, he highlighted the fact that we're image bearers, and that's about as important as it gets. That's human exceptionalism. The female number 2 said, God punished David and Bathsheba by taking the life of their son. And she made an argument about that. God thought it was morally okay to take an innocent life. But you have to understand something here. God has sovereignty over all human life. He is concurrently in the past, present, and future, and he can see exactly what he does to human life. Sometimes babies do die. Unfortunately, it's a tragic thing. Sometimes innocent people die. Sometimes people like Charlie Kirk die because of very guilty people. Unfortunately, we've got a lot of terrible stuff that goes on in the world. And it's because we live amidst original sin and we're in the middle of a spiritual battle between good and evil. And we can't take lukewarm positions on this. We cannot do that. We can't do that. You take a side. You're either for God or against him. There is no other way. There's no middle ground here. There's no middle ground on abortion. You're either for God and life, or you're against God and you're with death. Choose it. Make your choice. Be bold. Stand up for what you know is right. So what does Randal Rauser say? Now, I've had Randal on my channel a couple of times. He's very well-spoken Christian. He's very liberal. And I like him. I think he's a nice guy, but his opinions on things, I disagree. I disagree with his opinions a lot. And so he goes and he challenges Allie's premise that it is always wrong to kill an innocent human life. So what does he do? He trots out an example of an ectopic pregnancy where the human life has absolutely no chance of surviving and the mother's life is in tremendous risk. So it's not saying that you're taking a human life that has a capacity to survive. It's you're taking the human life that has no capacity to survive, no way it can live, and you're saving the mother. So this example to me is morally not equivalent. I think it's pretty ridiculous of an example. I'm sorry, Randal, but this one not very good. Again, ectopic pregnancy is not a viable baby. It's when the baby did not make it to the room in the proper way. And again, the baby could not be saved in any instance. Now, that speaks to abortions. In many cases, the baby could be saved, especially late term. Why not just induce the pregnancy? I mean, what a selfish thing to do what you do when you kill a baby late term, but beyond, any term to me is morally wrong. Rauser also said, well, it's acceptable to kill the baby inside the womb of a 10-year-old who was raped by her father. But Allie did grant that exception. It's a difficult one to talk about. She doesn't agree with it. But I would also say, I would add to what Allie said, is the young girl will experience much more pain by killing her preborn baby, just as millions of women who've aborted their babies have experienced. Now, do I just make this statement willy-nilly? No, I have a study that came out in 2023 by Reardon, Rafferty, and Longbuns, and it was published in Curious. And it says, quote, a retrospective survey was completed by 1,000 females aged 41 to 45 living in the United States. The survey instrument included 11 visual analog scales for respondents to rate their personal preferences and outcomes they attributed to their abortion decisions. Okay. A categorical question allowed women to identify if their abortions were wanted and consistent with their own values and preferences, or inconsistent with their values and preferences, wanted or coerced. Horrible situations when families, boyfriends, lovers, people like that coerce a poor woman into doing this morally egregious thing. Continued in the study of the 226 women. So you had a larger study, but only 226 reported that they'd had an abortion. Women reporting a history of abortion, 33% said they wanted that abortion. 43% said they accepted it. They accepted having an abortion, but they knew it was inconsistent with their values. Women know just intrinsically what's right and what's wrong when we have a baby inside of us. That's just what we do. And 24% said it was unwanted or coerced. Can you imagine that? So out of every 4 people who goes in to have an abortion, 1 was coerced into it. Pretty horrible stuff. Only wanted abortions were associated with positive emotions. So again, only 33% were identified with positive emotions or mental health gains. All other groups is a significant large group attributed more negative emotions and mental health outcomes to their abortions. 60% reported that they would have preferred to give birth if they had received more support from others or had more financial security. Now, that speaks to the idea that one of these interlocutors said about poor people having more abortions. Well, that's why society does need to step in and help people. And that's why I think we should support pregnancy resource centers. They're a wonderful place for women to go to get the help, the ultrasounds, and everything that they need to be able to have a baby. And if that doesn't work and you really can't bear bringing up the child yourself, consider adoption. In the United States, it's something like for every one baby put up for adoption, there are 36 families waiting. And so you can go through an abortion attorney and adoption attorney, I should say, and the attorney will help you and assist you in the whole process of finding the right parents for your baby. And that's certainly a very, very kind and loving thing to do, is to carry that baby to the through the process. So here's Randal Rauser, what he says next. Which would you save in a hypothetical burning warehouse with 108-day-old blastocysts in one room or a baby in another? He said the moral choice would be to save the baby. Well, he's applying deontological ethics. Anyone who's applying consequentialism or utilitarian ethics would say, no, I'd save the 100 blastocysts because it's maximizing the greatest good for the greatest number of people. But most people would say they'd save the baby in the room. But that brings up a very significant question. And I hate to say this because I have many people I know and love who've benefited from in vitro fertilization, but in vitro fertilization unfortunately results in the destruction of more human souls than even abortion. So what it is you're fertilizing numerous sperm and eggs, and you get these little blastocysts and they turn into embryos, and then they implant them around 3 to 5 days after they make the egg and the sperm unite. They fertilize it and they implant it and they hope that some take. And unfortunately, it ends up leading to a lot of them being destroyed. That's one of the reasons why the Catholic Church has sort of been a standalone church in condemning in vitro fertilization. It's one of the reasons. So I want to say good morning, everyday Catholic. I'm going to start trying to do this early in the morning because it's really the only time I can do it. I figured out I can't. I just can't seem to find the time during the week to make videos because I'm so busy with work. So anyway. But I do have a new cause. One thing I do is I'm a member of Respect for Life in our church. And because of them, I discovered that there is an abortion clinic literally about 5 minutes from where I work. And so I've decided to take it upon myself to every once in a while walk around the campus saying the rosary, saying specific prayers for the women who might be considering whether or not to have an abortion. And also occasionally I will ride down to the clinic and circle around it. I don't circle multiple times, but I ride down there, circle around while saying the rosary, and hoping that that spiritual weapon might be applied to a woman trying to make that awful choice. But I get to what I responded before. Why am I pro-life? I was pro-choice for many years. I was liberal. I was a Democrat. I was feminist. I was everything that you could imagine. And I had thought that, when I was in my 20s, I thought, well, if I ever got pregnant, if something ever happened, I would have an abortion. And I knew many people who had abortions. I knew people in college who had abortions. As I said before, I drove a friend to an abortion clinic in my 20s. Pretty awful stuff because I thought it was perfectly okay. But then what happened was when I was in my later 30s, I was married. I was married to my husband. We had our first child. First, we had a miscarriage, which was horrible, terrible experience. Then we had our first child, and we were so appreciative of our first child that we were so excited when we found out we were pregnant with the second one. And we went to have an ultrasound, and the lady said, wow, well, your little son has 2 soft markers for Down syndrome, but don't worry, we can terminate the pregnancy if it turns out your amniocentesis is positive. And I thought, what? You're referring to my son, whom I had named Sean, and he had little fingers, little toes, cute little body, the cutest little nose, and you're calling it a terminate the pregnancy, like he's just a pregnancy? It horrified me. And I came home and my husband and I made the decision that no matter what the case was in the amniocentesis, we were going to give birth to our son because that's the right thing to do. And thanks to that experience, I've become very pro-life. And I think it could lead a lot of us to becoming pro-life. So that's the beauty of God working through us. Sometimes he uses these sort of tragic experiences to turn us into advocating for life and for praying for others to do the same. You can see here pictured, the very first picture here is my kids when they were really young with my husband, Keith. And then my kids here, Jack and Sean, you can see in the next picture, again, they were very young there. We were at the beach in the third picture. And the fourth one, they're actually in my office. They go to the university where I work. So they were in my office and it was very exciting to see them. And it's always exciting to see my sons. They're definitely the highlight of the day. And so thank you for coming in. Everyday Catholic Gina, I want to have you back on my channel. So we got to figure that out. It would be wonderful to do that. Looks like you get up early too. So maybe we could do something early one morning. I've decided I'm going to start getting up earlier today. I woke up at 4:30, although that was not intentional. I couldn't get back to sleep. But anyway, so thank you guys for coming in here. Please like, subscribe if you like this kind of content. And just remember, whether you eat, drink, or whatever you do it all for the glory of God. Thank you.